stay true to yourself. Keep believing. Never give up on your dreams. There is something out there for you, and if you keep trucking away, keep digging in, keep being curious, you're gonna find it.
Welcome, everybody, to the Build to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on the journey from millions to billions. We believe the key to scaling and compounding your wealth in life starts every single day with the mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Our ultimate goal is to have you scale and compound your wealth in life so you can give more or all of it away to help MVPs. My name is Brett Swarts. In every episode, we're joined by some of the world's best entrepreneurs, millionaires, and billionaires, where they share their stories, secrets, and wisdom with us so we can all level up in business and in our life as well. I'm excited about our next guest. He's out of Minnesota, and he is an expert when it comes to all things like when it comes to data, marketing intelligence, and basically figuring out ways to make sense and build our businesses with data and marketing in particular. We're going to be speaking about how to do that. This gentleman has helped hundreds of businesses turn their marketing chaos into clarity, and he's going to help us do that today. Please welcome to the show with me, Joshua Lauer. Joshua, how are we doing?
Good. How are you, Brett?
Doing well, thanks. For listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us just a little bit about your story and then your current focus?
Yeah, so I spent most of my 20s being a songwriter in my parents' basement, not making much money, and was reading a Rolling Stone and came across Full Sail University had a program for internet marketing. I felt like that was sort of the missing ingredient in my skill set at the time. So I went back to school and kind of finished in 2012 and started in this sort of digital marketing world that we're in today. For the first 4 years or so, was working at an agency, and I kind of became the default in-house guy for all the analytics projects for all the various websites that they were pushing out. And then in 2016, I moved on to Lead Pages, where I was kind of an interesting sort of marketer on the marketing team for a marketing product. And it was kind of a cool sort of, perspective as far as you get to see all these sort of small businesses and the things that they're trying out. And they had acquired a company called Drip that was in the process of kind of rebranding around the time. It went from marketing automation that doesn't suck to like the e-commerce CRM that you maybe hadn't realized that you needed yet for your e-commerce business. And then from there, I ended up working at a company called Evereve, which is a women's clothing retailer, fashion clothing, with about 100 plus locations across the United States and an e-commerce website. Moved on to a company called Telesign about a year later when the pandemic striked. And then a few years after that, I decided I had enough friends that were hitting me up from all these different places I'd worked over the years asking for tracking help. There was the launch of GA4, which is kind of the newer version of Google Analytics. And I thought to myself, I could probably go full-time freelance with this stuff. And here we are now.
Awesome. Fantastic. And so let's dive right into the topic at hand, which is, using data to build your marketing, marketing engine, or just get great insights to grow your business through marketing. So what is the number one secret, Joshua, to doing just that?
I think the biggest secret is that if you ask me a question after something happens and I didn't know it was going to happen before that, it's going to be hard to answer that question. So you need a tracking plan before you launch your marketing campaign. A lot of people think about the creative, whether it's video, various talents, the whole vision of the, marketing brand and what is that brand message. Those things are all super important. We have no brand campaigns, no marketing campaigns without them. But at the same time, launching a campaign without a proper tracking strategy is going to make it really hard to understand how that's actually doing in terms of influencing potential new customers and all sorts of things.
Makes sense. Okay, so make sure you have a tracking plan in place before launching a campaign. What is and by the way, before we go into secret number 2, is that what you do? Is that what you help people set up? Is being able to set and get all that in place?
Yep. Yeah. I kind of come in, check out your site, usually ask the question like, here's what I'm seeing in your data. Does that sound right? And then that's like the moment where it's sort of like, sometimes you know, you get these people that are like, well, I've been on this team. There's a few different guys that have come in here and worked on this stuff, and it used to be this, and now it's that. And they're kind of like, it's sort of like if you just walked into someone's house and it's sort of a messy living room, and they're a little bit embarrassed about it, like, and it's like, it's okay, we'll get it all cleaned up, and really kind of like, what is the number one thing that you're trying to make sure that people do on your website, right? And so finding out what that is and identifying a tracking plan.
Makes sense. And then I imagine a tracking plan includes, are you tracking, email opened up clicks? Are you tracking how much time they're spending on what part of your website? Are you tracking like the pixels and how it follows somebody into like a Facebook ad, that kind of thing, Joshua? Like walk us through, like, what exactly are you tracking?
Yeah, right. So you got your website. We'll throw Google Analytics on there, which is going to give us like sessions, right? So like people come to your site, hang out for a while, view a few different pages, maybe submit a form, maybe buy something, depending on the business. And so kind of all of that. But then, as you mentioned, Facebook Pixel certainly is a part of that. So one, setting all that stuff up. Two, making it so we have a copy of all that data somewhere. So putting it into like a BigQuery. BigQuery is my tool of choice there for a data warehouse because it plays really nicely with Google Analytics and Google Ads, all the Google products. And once you get in there, once you have your analytics data there, your spend data from Facebook, along with all the campaigns and the creative, you can start to do pretty interesting things where you're sort of joining those data sets where they're typically not joined, right? So like with Facebook, for example, there's like a half a dozen different like attribution metrics, and they have to do with like how you have set up your campaign to an extent, right? So you could have a 1-day view through conversion, which is somebody saw the ad within the last 24 hours, and we're going to count if they, complete the purchase or fill out the form as attributed to this ad. Or maybe it was a 1-day click, so they had to at least click on the ad to count. So we got 1-day view or click, 7-day view or click, 28-day view or click, and you can see how there's a lot of sort of nuance to that. And let's say we were going with the 28-day view for some reason, you might be like, well, why would you do that? So if you have a longer sales cycle, right? If you're in the B2B space, those deals sometimes take 6 months to 12 months or longer to close, right? If it's a big enough deal. And so something like that, you're going to want a longer attribution window. But then the trick there is, if you're like, it's, July 1st, how do we do for the month of June? We need to wait till basically July 28th to have those numbers all kind of rounded out. So there's some nuances that comes along with like the various attribution windows and how you're able to make sense of those. Because if you're looking at those on the 1st, every single day up until the 28th, you're going to have slightly different numbers depending on how things are shaking out with the attribution there.
Got it. Speaking with Joshua Lauer, everybody, and you can find him on LinkedIn, and you can just search his name and spell his last name for you in case you're just listening. Lauer is Joshua Lauer. Okay, this is good. This is very practical. What's the next step in the process once you've got some of these attribution windows set up? You've analyzed, and you got a tracking system in place. You got BigQuery going in. You got the pixels. Google Analytics connected. What's the next step in the process, Joshua?
At this point, usually that's about time to put together a dashboard, right? So we're going to take all that data that's been aggregated into the data warehouse, BigQuery. And we're going to usually Looker Data Studio's one of the tools that I prefer. It starts off free for anyone that wants to get into it, and it plugs into BigQuery. So anything you have in BigQuery, you can pull into there. So that usually involves a variety of different reports. So an overview of your sessions, like how are people getting to the site? Are they coming from organic search? Are they coming from organic social? Are they coming from LinkedIn ads, Facebook ads, TikTok ads, whatever you're doing there, right? So we're going to kind of group all that traffic into those buckets, get overall high level aggregated numbers, right? Sessions, how many users, how many purchases if it's an e-commerce site, or how many forms submitted if it's more of a B2B thing. Then we're going to also kind of calculate that conversion rate so we can kind of get a sense of like what's bringing in the most traffic, what's doing the best job at that traffic turning into a potential lead or customer. And then, so that's your kind of first level, right? Then the next page, we could break that down a little bit further. Instead of grouping it by the traffic, we can group it by the device. Like, is it a desktop, mobile, or tablet device? And there's various reasons why you might be interested in that. If we're looking at that data, we could find that your site is 74% mobile. We could also find it's 74% desktop. And if it is, there's going to be different things you're going to want to prioritize when you're rolling out new features or doing various design updates, right? So then you're like, okay, now we know the traffic's getting here. We've got an understanding of some of the devices that are coming to the site. What pages are they landed on, right? You probably know what pages you're sending them to from your ads, and you probably have also ad, platform data around, this campaign went to this landing page and it's reporting this many conversions, which is great. But what did you actually see on the website for the same traffic, right? So what is Google Analytics telling us, and how does that compare to what the ad platforms are saying? So now we've got some landing page data, which helps us understand sort of the content that's, probably resonating the most. We might then want to look at some of that data and say, hey, this page here got a lot of traffic, but it's not converting super well. How come? That's kind of maybe one of the first questions you might ask. Then we might look at another page that's converting a little better and try to compare them, sort of ask ourselves questions around like what's going so well over here that's not so well over there. And sort of as we get going with this, you might kind of, I don't know if you're familiar with that book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie.
Yeah.
It's going to want a glass of milk and then something else and something. So that sort of tends to be how the data stuff is, right? We answer the first question. There's usually a burning question that we start with. We get the data, streamlined. We figure out the answer to that question, and then 10 more questions pop up. And then, sometimes there are questions like, well, did you count for this? Are you filtering this out? Let's say we have a form, and it's a B2B sort of angle, right? So you're trying to get leads to fill out this form, but for whatever reason, the site was built in a certain way where you could also have someone filling out the form if they want support or something like that, right? So like, we don't want to count those people in that form. So look, we got the form tracking, but they're like, this seems really high for the lead volume. Turns out there's a drop down or something like that, and you only want to count the form when they select the drop down that indicates they're looking to talk to sales. All right, that would be an example of something you might find out after the fact. That's something that I'm certainly going to be looking at if there's any drop downs on the form right out of the gates. But that's an example too of like, sometimes you discover things where the business thinks about it a little differently. We have to create an exception here or there to account for this situation or that situation. And not all of these events are created equal, so to speak.
Okay, excellent. That makes sense. So that's step number 2, putting together a dashboard, asking the right questions, figuring out the conversion rate, figuring out the devices that people are going to, find out what the content that's most resonating the most. And that makes sense. Like, you ask a question and then it opens up a whole other series of questions, which helps to dial down even more niche. And then ultimately, I think that's what we're getting at, taking that data, and now based upon what we're finding, that you pour on the fire, the spend, or you pour on the fire into those areas, and then and take off the gas on the other areas. Is that kind of what we're getting to here, Josh, or what's the next step?
Yeah, I mean, certainly once we have better visibility into, how the various campaigns are performing, what landing pages are performing better, we may decide to shift spend one way or another. Maybe the ads need to send more to this other page that converts better, or is it an ad targeting thing? Like that page that wasn't converting well, maybe there's something on the ad side where it's like, oh, we were targeting, these groups, and this other page was targeting these other groups. And so maybe we want to dial that back. And that kind of gets into a kind of another next level thing that you're talking about there. When you are adjusting budgets, we've got our intuitive sense of like looking at the data. We kind of, oh, maybe this wasn't right. Or, I think a big part of business is in understanding people and human behavior, right? So like when you're analyzing your targeting and all your data, you can't forget that obviously there's people behind all these numbers, right? And so like, you got to think about that to an extent, and that could color your perspective. You could end up being a little bit biased. That bias may or may not be the right thing. And so like the next kind of level is like a marketing mix modeling sort of analysis, where you can take your spend, run it through some machine learning, and it can say, all right, for the same amount of money next week, if you allocated, this much more to Google ads, a little bit less over to Facebook ads over here, we think that would increase your revenue by X percent. And these kinds of tools can spit out confidence intervals so you can be, as confident as ever when you decide to shift that budget around.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, what's the next step after that? I mean, and then walk us through how someone can work with you to get started and the type of groups you're working with.
Yeah, so you mentioned my LinkedIn profile earlier. Thanks for doing that. Again, Joshua Lauer, Lauer. Drop me a message there. The picture is myself, probably about 15 years ago at a friend's wedding. Probably long overdue for an update, but reach out. Use the words deep dive audit, mention the podcast, and I'll get back to you with the time to set up a call. We can hop on the call for an hour, talk about your business, talk about your pain points, and figure out what the next steps would be.
Good. And then right, that makes sense. And then you're going to do an audit, you're going to deep dive, figure out the pain points, all the stuff you just said there, figure out what the next steps can be. And then what is kind of your maybe you can do like a success story or like a recent client story that you helped, customer you helped, kind of make this come to life a little bit more. Is there anything that kind of comes to mind?
Yeah, let's see here. Well, so there's a particular company that I think was probably prior to when I first started working with them, we'd see somewhere in the neighborhood of around like 60K in revenue per day. That same company today can have days that are over $1 million. And so, the average is probably closer to 300 to 400K per day.
Wow. And so how long did that take for that to turn around? Like from the time you started working with them, like what does that typically take?
That's probably a longer relationship there. So we're looking at probably about 5 years for that. That turnaround, 3 to 5 years, somewhere in there. It varies, sometimes depending on the business, those are more exciting numbers, right? Some others, if we're talking about like the B2B space, it's more of a, the quality of the leads and the quality of the deals and the sort of pipeline is coming up as bigger and we're having higher close rates. And so it's a little bit more complicated and nuanced to be like, and I think that's another kind of interesting thing, right? So like if you talk about the sales team angle for a minute, like a lot of times a marketing team is incentivized specifically on leads and it's lead volume, right? Because if you do the basic napkin math, and you're like, we had this many leads and we have this many people calling them up and we close this many or whatever. You got this sort of like waterfall funnel. The marketing team oftentimes is focused on just a volume of leads, and burying your sales team in crappy leads is not necessarily the best thing you can do for your business. So, identifying a tracking plan that allows the marketing data to flow all the way into your CRM system where you can see if those leads are actually becoming opportunities can shift it. You might actually see less leads, but like much larger numbers in terms of the pipeline you're generating, the deals you're closing. And so that's kind of another thing that I like to stress when it comes to the data. You've got a lot of case studies out there where it's like, percent increase, year over year, month over month, whatever it is. And these numbers are like 300%. And they're like, whoa, we got this tool, we worked with this company, whatever, we jacked up these numbers. Those percentages don't mean anything without being sort of next to an actual number. So there was a point where I was working at a particular company and they celebrated having like an open rate that was like something like 67% on their emails, right? So it's like 2 out of every 3 people you sent your email to actually opened it. Now, if we were sending that to the full list, that would be pretty incredible. But there was so much segmenting and targeting done that like the actual list size was something like less than 2,000 people. And so you're still getting some reach there. But, if the company is sending to less than 2,000 people and celebrating a 76% open rate or whatever it is, and we're talking about the actual list that the company normally would send to, if it's the full list, is closer to like 150,000 or 200,000 people, you kind of get this message mismatch where people in the company think, because they don't understand like the nuances, they hear 76%, they think it's 76% at 200,000. when it's a much more targeted email. And so, that's where, different case studies that kind of showcase percent increases without the numbers. Usually there's a reason they don't share the numbers. They're probably not allowed to share the numbers, right? And so I tend to shy away from like sensational claims, and I think it's important within these dashboards I'm talking about. You have your percent change, but you have your actual numbers next to those, because if we're talking about, let's take it to sports for a minute, right? Like we talk about like NFL stats, you'll oftentimes hear like quarterbacks that have played for at least this many, games with at least this many passes, and then we rank them, right? So, because if you ranked all of them, the backup quarterback that comes in and throws like one touchdown pass at the end of the game, just that's 100% touchdown rate. Like that's not, like that guy's not going to do that every time he gets the ball, So I think it's important to understand where you are, and the place that you stand is kind of fundamentally different than where anyone else is standing. And those increases that you can make are very much things that come from like really understanding your business and what kind of levers you can pull. And really, sometimes some businesses have a much higher ceiling than others, right? What is the size of your market? So all this data goes together. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great insight. And it makes sense that numbers are more definitely got to be taken in context and more than maybe what initially you would think. And I do like how you say that, like, you got to connect it to closed revenue, right? I mean, you can't just say, we got you more leads. Well, were they quality leads? And you're right. Did you bury the sales team? Like, let's actually look at what came of these leads and did they close and which ones didn't? And let's figure out, let's spend more time on the ones that do close, right? And then target down and not spend time and money and energy on those that don't.
Yeah.
So
here's a different thing that might be sort of surprising, probably for people that don't think about this stuff on a regular basis. If you come to a website, right? Anyone comes to the website, we start a session and we talk about typical website conversion rates where they either buy something or fill out a form in that 1% to 3% sort of area. And there's a lot of companies that are like, well, what are the other 97% doing? But if you do one more thing after you come to the website, you view one more page, that conversion rate jumps on average to about 17 to 25%, right? So like if we get you to do one more thing after you come to the website, the conversion rate is much, much higher. Now, if it's 17 to 25% for anyone that's done at least two things, think about all the tools out there that are like, hey, we added this tool to the site and we saw this conversion rate increase by however much, right? Like 17% versus 3% is a pretty large increase. So it's kind of like, if you think about like almost like a placebo effect kind of thing here, like comparing your new tool that you just installed that you think is going to sort of change the world with your website, compare that to the groups of people on your website that viewed 2 pages.
Really fascinating. So let's practically say that. So like you go and you have like book a time with me, right? But they may not be willing to book a time with you right now, but you also have maybe a call to action on a banner or something that says, learn more about me or learn more about our history or some kind of tool that's useful, right? Frequently asked questions, right? The top 3 frequently asked questions. Now they click on that, then they get some value there. And now they're more likely to go back and book the time. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. Yeah. If you get them to do just anything more than one page view, the chances that they do something that you actually want them to do are much higher.
And I would think you gotta wow them, right, with that, whatever that thing is. So that second page, you just got to be like, oh man, this is really impressive. Why wouldn't I meet with them, or why wouldn't I, take the next step? That's really any other like helpful like wisdom on that piece up for your website, or that you come down to, or?
Well, I think a lot, A/B testing is not as in vogue as it was because of like machine learning, but like, and so like, let the robots figure it out. But like, when you're doing a split test, there's always this kind of like, we want to have this control group that is unaffected. But if we're comparing, apples to oranges, like that might not be right. So if you have a experience where maybe you're changing something that's like halfway down the page, you might want to compare not just like this group saw the version A, this other group saw version B, but like the group that saw version A, did they even scroll 50% of the way down the page? Because if they didn't, they wouldn't have even on the other side seen the different treatment that you have. And so kind of making sure you normalize and understand the groups of people that are actually seeing the experience is an important way to measure it and understand, did this actually make a meaningful impact, or is it something that potentially looks better than it is? And I think that's kind of, when it comes to data, you're like, oh, wow. Like there's plenty of like eureka moments where you're like, this is going to change everything. Like I'm getting a raise, like they're going to love this. And then you kind of unpack it and you're like, well, if we compare this to another, maybe there was a thing here in the middle of the page and there's something on the right that you could also interact with. And you're like, okay, if anyone clicks on that thing on the right, how do they do? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, they actually convert higher. And you're like, okay, this isn't as game changer as I thought. But when you slice it and segment it down, of course, if something's super targeted and there's less people and all this stuff, like the conversion rates are going to be higher. So like the kind of trick there is like knowing that, how do you scale that back up?
Awesome. Hey, we're out of time. You ready for the lightning round?
What was that?
I said, oh, so we're out of time. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So knowing what you know now, Joshua, if you go back to your 20-year-old self, what's the one gold nugget make sure you tell yourself to do?
Oh man, stay true to yourself. Keep believing. Never give up. Never give up on your dreams. There is something out there for you, and if you keep trucking away, keep digging in, keep being curious, you're gonna find it.
Awesome. Question number 2, number 1 book you recommended the most in the past year?
Ooh. I would say, it's an older book, but older. The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle is one that I think, as far as like in my life, I constantly think about that book as far as like, you could do it tomorrow or you could do it right now. Kind of, it's a constant sort of, and I'm very much making it way simpler than it is. But The Power of Now, it's a real thing, and it's a great book.
Love it. What about for marketing or anything you're talking about here? Like any books that come to mind for a business owner who wants to read?
There is a new book that I just got into. I'm pulling it up here because I'm trying to recall the exact name of it. 1 second. It's a book about analytics, and it's called Website Wealth: A Business Leader's Guide to Driving Real Value from Your Analytics.
Awesome.
It's by Philippa Gamse. That's Gamse.
Cool. Thank you. That's awesome. Check it out. Number 1 way you're using ChatGPT?
I use it more for content than data stuff. I think like one of the intriguing things I did with it was actually I was struggling to come up with a bio, and I asked it to come up with a 250-word bio for Joshua Lauer, the marketing professional from Minneapolis, and the 250 words that it came up with sort of blew me away as far as what it was able to find about me on the internet. I think also another use case that's really kind of interesting is if there's a particular marketing voice that you like, you can say like, yeah, I'm working on this campaign for my business and I'm really into Simon Sinek or Gary Vee or whoever it is. Can you write me like some blurbs in the style of these guys? And if you're familiar with those voices, you'll feel like you're reading their words. It's kind of amazing.
Okay, awesome. That's fantastic tips. Number 1 leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
I think it's going to be Steve Jobs, be the change you want to see. That was Steve
Yeah.
Jobs, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Last question. After all your success and everything you've done, how do you best stay centered in your values and then also stay encouraged to charge forward to reach even higher heights?
Oh, it's, I think you never forget where you came from, right? Like there were years where I did not make that much money, and I constantly am reminded of that, and I think, like, you got to stay humble. Like, there's as you kind of move along and have success, there's a confidence that creeps in, which is good because confidence is great. But, like, on the flip side, if you don't have a little bit of, like, imposter syndrome, you might be a little overconfident.
Awesome. Joshua Lauer, it's been more than a pleasure, man. You dropped tons of value, tons of content here, tons of helpful tips and wisdom. I want to encourage you to keep helping business owners make sense of their data so they can grow their businesses and serve more people. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, one last time, what's the best place for them to find you?
LinkedIn, Joshua Lauer, that's Lauer. Send me a message with the words Deep Dive Audit, and we'll get some time on the calendar.
Awesome. Thank you, Joshua. I also want to thank all of our listeners and viewers for watching and or listening to another episode of the Build It to Billions podcast, also streaming on Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast and YouTube channels. My name is Brett Swarts, and we're on this journey with you to scale from millions to billions so we can give more all of it away to help MVPs. I hope you enjoyed this episode and took good notes and are taking action steps to implement these things, and or just hiring Joshua to help you, right? Hire the who, don't be the how, to implement all of these things. Appreciate everyone listening or watching, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Bye now.